Welcome back to the PI Files, where we dig into real cases, real people, and the role of private investigators in uncovering the truth. I'm your host, Eric Peterson. I'm a licensed private investigator here in California. Today, we're revisiting the story that shocked the country, Dirty John. It's the story of a charismatic con man named John Meehan, a master manipulator with a terrifying past, and the family he targeted. It's also the story of resilience, survival, and strength, embodied by my guest today, Terra Newell. But before we talk to Terra, let's take a look back at the timeline and how it all unfolded. It all started in October of 2014 when Deborah Newell, a successful interior designer from Orange County, met John Meehan on a dating site. He said he was an anesthesiologist who had just returned from a humanitarian mission in Iraq. He seemed charming, confident, and attentive. Just 2 months later, in December of 2014, Deborah married John in a quick Las Vegas ceremony. Her daughters Jacqueline and Tara were skeptical from the start. Something about him didn't sit right. They were right to worry. In early 2015, Deborah began noticing cracks in John's story. He didn't go to work, he kept her isolated, and his past didn't add up. So she started digging. She learned that John had a criminal record, a long one. He wasn't a doctor at all. He was a convicted felon with a history of restraining orders, drug abuse, and scams. By mid-2015, Deborah had left him and annulled the marriage. But John didn't let go. He stalked her, he harassed her, and he began targeting her children, especially Tara. On August 20th, 2016, John Meehan took things to the next level. He waited for Tara outside her apartment complex in Newport Beach, armed with a knife and a plan. But what happened next turned the tables. Tara fought back. In a violent struggle for her life, she acted in self-defense and ultimately killed her attacker, John Meehan. He ended up dying 4 days later on August 24th. Tara survived, but the trauma was deep, and yet she had emerged as a powerful voice for survivors. In 2017, the story became a national phenomenon with the launch of the Dirty John podcast by the LA Times and Wondery. And in 2018, Bravo aired a dramatized series starring Connie Britton and Eric Bana, bringing even more attention to the case. But here's what's often missed. Behind the headlines, behind the dramatization, are real people, like Terra Newell, who lived this. Today, she's sharing her healing journey, what she's learned, and how she's using her voice to help others avoid predators like John Meehan. So now let's shift from the timeline to the heart of this story. Terra Newell is here with us today, not to relive the day of the attack, but to help us understand what came before and what came after. She's an advocate, a survivor, and a brave voice for change. Terra, thank you so much for being with us on the PI Files.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we went through the timeline, and I wanted to get your perspective on everything from what happened back then, before then, and then now. Can you take us back to when your mom first met John Meehan, and what was your initial impression of him?
When I met him, he was kind of all over the place. I just didn't get a great impression of him. I was wondering why he was staying at my mom's place all the time, why he was using my mom's cars, why he wasn't using his own, especially if he was a doctor and a anesthesiologist.
Did your mom have that behavior with other men, or was it just him in terms of moving it, letting people use cars and move in? And
my mom was a very trusting woman, and I feel like he was really good at what he did though, and he was just really charming. Mm-hmm. And he was able to just gain her trust easily, where I say she wouldn't be letting like people use her cars that she just met for like first couple weeks,
Yeah.
And he was able to really get in there and gain that trust and really pull with her heartstrings.
Got it. When you look back after you've gained all this knowledge and experience, and was there any red flags that you noticed that you didn't see at the time?
Well, I didn't really know the doctor world or anything like that. So there was a box inside a closet, and it was a nursing certificate. And I didn't put two and two together that, he wasn't an anesthesiologist. He had his nursing license, but it was actually not legit at the time because he had done so many things to get it revoked and taken away and stuff.
So what was in the box? What was in the box? You said there was a bunch of...
It was a nursing certificate, and it was just like right on top of the box. And so to me, that was a red flag. Not knowing it was a red flag because I didn't even piece together. But when I confronted him, he got so defensive over it, and he accused me of snooping. And I was literally just staying in the room, and I opened the closet to put my bags, and it was blatantly right in sight, and it was right, like the first thing on top of the box. Like the box was open and it wasn't closed or anything. It was just like a pile of stuff. And then the first thing on the box was a nursing certificate of his.
Wasn't there another time where your mom found paperwork actually showing his criminal history and things like that? Wasn't there paperwork that she found at some point?
So she was confronted with my brother-in-law, my sister, and my other sister, and my brother-in-law hired a private investigator to look into him, and then we brought all this information to her, and then that's when we found out a lot of stuff about his criminal history, his stalking history, previous restraining orders. There was assault charges. There was so many things on him.
So it wasn't something that he had in the closet. It was stuff that was dug up by the private investigator.
Yes.
And presented. Was that before or after your sister did the GPS on your mom's car that he was driving?
Yes. So that actually happened right when my mom started to go back to John. So she left him the first time. We brought all that paperwork to her. And then he was actually able to bring her to lawyers. And those lawyers told her that this is different John Meehan's. This is this. He had lawyers in his pocket because he would get them disbarred.
So he just kind of had recruited some attorneys to lie for him.
Yes.
And from my perspective as a PI, essentially what you're doing is there's identifiers. So it's clear as day. And social, birth, everything. So yes, there's probably more than one John Meehans in this world.
There is, and there's a doctor in Orange County that's a John Meehan.
Wow. Hopefully he's not dirty. Yeah. As a PI, you look through that stuff, or in law enforcement or whatever. That's crazy that he had somebody. I would imagine those attorneys could get disbarred for doing what they did,
Yeah. Well, I wonder also if he brought the paperwork to them and some of it was the different John Meehans. Maybe. Because when I have been going over paperwork, I have noticed, okay, is this him? Is this him? I have to kind of go back and do a deep dive. And I honestly wonder if it was some type of strategy, knowing that there was someone else here with that name that did something that he wanted to do.
Yeah. What other tactics did he use to isolate or manipulate your family?
He would start stuff with my sister, Jacqueline. He would send her text messages here and there. And then he would send stuff from my mom's phone, pretending to be her. And then he started to say to my mom that Terra and Jacqueline just want you for your money, that they just, they're spoiled brats, this and that. And so that created the divide with me and my mom and my sister. And also I got into it with John one day because it was the day before Thanksgiving and I just had questions about, using her car. And he came up behind her and we had a confrontation, and then it resulted as me leaving, not spending Thanksgiving with my family. And then he did do stuff that was inappropriate, talk about certain things in front of my nieces and nephews. And so my brothers and sisters that had those kids, they didn't really like that. And so they started to put boundaries around their kids and John and my mom, saying that my mom couldn't see the kids if she was with John, like he's not to be around them because he's saying inappropriate things as well.
Did you have a good relationship with your siblings at this time, before this time, now?
Yeah, no, before we were a very tight-knit family. Mm-hmm. At one point, we all literally lived in the same neighborhood, had my brother and then his wife and then their kids lived in a townhouse down the street. And then my other sister lived in a townhouse down the street, and we were all in the same community. We don't live there anymore, but we lived in this place called Woodbury. in Irvine, and it was just a really great community, and we could walk to each other's houses all the time. We could go meet each other at the community pool. And so at that point we were very close. And then this honestly did create a very heavy divide in my family, where it's still, we worked through a lot of things, but there's always like a process that we still have to go through afterwards.
Got it. And then Jacqueline, she was the one that was pretty assertive at the beginning of this, and she ended up getting a couple of GPS trackers. Did that just kind of fizzle out? Because I think, didn't she prove that, hey, you're not going to a hospital, even though, and then I heard a story where your mom took him to like a fancy gala or something. He wore his scrubs. And then I think there was you could, like, from like germs and stuff, like the bottom of the scrubs were dirty, and like you could see some of these signs and stuff. But my point is, what transpired with Jacqueline and the GPS?
Okay, so she went to a spyware shop. I believe it was like in Newport Boulevard, somewhere around that. It used to be around. I don't think it's there anymore, though. And she would go get these trackers, and then she would buy them. I would go meet up with my mom, and I would text Jacqueline where we were, and then she would go run and put them under the car in valet. And then it would track my mom's movement as well as John's movement. And then I would tell her when I would go back with my mom, and then she would come collect them and then recharge them and everything.
Yeah. Did she present that evidence to your mom, and your mom just kind of brushed it off? Or
Yes, because when you're in it, you're not able to really see everything, and you think everything's an attack on your relationship, and you get defensive.
Yeah.
Like, I know so many people, even if they're in just like a little bit of an unhealthy relationship, not a psychopath or anything, they're just going to get defensive about it, and it's the common response to go to.
Yeah. Did you guys have any skepticism because your mom had been married, a couple of times before? Like, we're like, hey, maybe take your time with this one, regardless of who he was or some of his behavior?
I think that my mom didn't have the best picker. I think that she didn't choose the best men, and it's an ongoing process to also learn that and really adapt that into your life and break that cycle, because like that could be a huge generational pattern that you're trying to break. And so I think that we were very skeptical of all the men coming in. She would bring them around like no other. It was just like there would be a bad man that latches onto my mom, and my mom's a very kind person. And there's the classic empath narcissist relationship, and she's like the classic empath in that. And so we definitely were wary.
And then as things started to escalate, how did you and your family handle, some of the fear, uncertainty? What did you guys do?
We started to try to go to the police. We tried to get help for everything. And it's still like really hard for me to talk about at times. But it's just, we tried everything to kind of like get away from him. And then my mom ended up hiring a private investigator herself that this person, Michael O'Neill, recommended. He's an attorney. And that's who also like was trying to get like John away and deal with like the divorce and try to get it annulled and everything as well. Because they were only married not too long. And so she was in the process of that. And then he also kept missing the court dates and all that stuff.
Yeah, she started that process.
Yes.
And then he just was no show.
Yes.
And then did he want money? Was there any discussion? Did he want to get as much money as he could in that process?
And then that's why my mom met up with him, because she thought maybe I could pay him off. He could go away, just leave us alone for the rest of our lives. But you don't do that with a psychopath, because they always have a different end goal.
Yeah.
It's always going to be more money, more this, more that.
You spoke about law enforcement, and, I responded to a lot of domestic violence calls. And when I worked with like old time training officers or other officers, OJ was the biggest thing in the 90s. And so on the LAPD police cars, it's, there's no excuse for domestic violence was the bumper sticker. But we would go, and then sometimes the woman wouldn't want the person to be arrested, or the man, or whoever was the victim. And a lot of officers would just say, well, it's because of the OJ thing. That would be a common response. And it made it a felony to have the visible injuries. I think it's gotten better, but law enforcement response to things, and as personalities are getting identified and certain behaviors, I think things have gotten better, and we'll get to that, but it's such a slow moving process. What role I heard your mom talking about interacting with the police. What role did they play initially? Did they do much?
She tried to get several restraining orders on him. I believe she went to Laguna Beach, or she went to Irvine for sure. Mm-hmm. I believe she went to Newport, and then I think maybe Laguna Beach. I'm not 100% sure about that though. I know he had a restraining order with someone in Laguna Beach.
Yeah.
And we weren't able to get it at all, and it's really strange also given his prior history, is that he had several past restraining orders on him. His sister had one on him. And so it was really crazy that we just weren't able to get that. And then it seems like I remember him saying too that he had some connection with the law, this and that, and he was able to slide with certain things. And at one point in his life, he was an FBI informant, because or maybe not an FBI, but he was an informant for something, because he did give a lot of information about this cocaine, this drug ring that was going on, this cocaine thing that was going on, and then he was the rat in that. And so he gave all the information, and that allowed him to get less time in jail.
I've been to restraining order court. I've heard judges, you need a lot, and the police departments are essentially a conduit, whether it's a report or whatever. It's up to the DA to file charges. It's up to the judge to, because you don't need a police report to go file a restraining order. But you need facts, and you can't just have text messages from unknown numbers and things like that. So it's very tough, but yeah. I can see the frustration there. The PI, they just did the background, or did they do anything else?
They did a full background on him, and there was two, and then my mom hired the one she had when she got back to him the first time, and then she was trying to figure out how to leave him again. And then that's when we got so much more information about him being in jail in a different state, and him cutting his stomach open in jail, stuffing feces down it, and doing all of these. Also, yeah. He jumped down an elevator shaft and pulled down a cop with him.
Oh, man.
So he had a lot going on.
Yeah. So what was the story behind that, or where was that?
It was in the Midwest, where I want to say. And he got in trouble at the hospital he was working at, and known for stealing drugs there. And then when they were trying to find him and stuff, somehow he was running away, and then fell down an elevator shaft and pulled the cop with him.
Yeah. So, and at one point, did your mom hire a forensic psychologist or something during this process? I thought I heard that in the research.
She did, or she just she talked to an expert.
Got it.
And then they said that he would try to go after either Jacqueline or her, and that I was basically not to be worried about that way. Mm-hmm. And that person was wrong.
Yeah, clearly, yeah. Any advice you'd give somebody who suspects a loved one is being manipulated or abused?
First and foremost, always pay attention to yourself. Put your own oxygen mask on before you take it away from anyone else or try to put it on anyone else, because it's important to take care of yourself at the end of the day, and figure out, figure out how to be there with boundaries. If something seems not right, you know, you can always do what I did, hire a private investigator. Well, not what I did, but my brother-in-law did, and hire a private investigator, get information, make sure you're actually correct. Or you can even go and do like a little like report yourself and just like go to like Spokio and get the information and see what you can dig up on them. And if you bring any information to them, you better have hard facts, and you better be prepared for them to not agree with you and to possibly end that relationship.
I know you've mentioned in previous podcasts you've had, you know, a bad relationship prior to this. Did that help you in seeing some of the red flags here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Most definitely, because that person that I was with, he was a drug user. And so there was certain similarities that I saw with John and him, and certain also manipulation things they would do, manipulation tactics. And then also, like the person that I was with too, he would go and he would steal from girls, and then he would tell me about that. And I was just like, I love you, so I don't know what to do with that information. And a really skewed love. And later in life, you realize it's all abuse. But I was young and dumb and didn't know what was happening. And so it really did give me a lot of equipment to recognize that, because when you see something happening, you already know the signs.
Yeah. I don't know if you've ever, I'm sure you have seen Terminator, where he goes through like those scenarios of things. He's walking around and you can just do those checkboxes. Okay, this is this, because of that experience and those interactions. And then also the information that's out there with, you know, I know you've mentioned Laura Richards before, and I've listened to some of her stuff. You know, there's some great information that comes out with all this stuff to help people.
Yes.
How about the boundaries or self-care practices that's been most important to you in this kind of aftermath?
Just lots and lots of EMDR therapy. I've done so much of it. I've probably done around 50 or 60 sessions. And that's been extremely helpful for rewiring my brain, because after an incident like I went through with having to defend my life, I was not a normal person after that. And your brain just completely changes. You're just like on red alert all the time, and you're in this hyper state of fight or flight. And it's really hard to get out of all the time. And so doing lots of therapy, and also figuring out like a daily routine, having modalities that you do. Like right before this, I did Legree, and then I love to do yoga. I also teach puppy yoga. And so that brings a lot of joy in my life, and just trying to do things that make you happy. And if you are also like in a state that's always going to re-trigger you, like getting out of that environment would be helpful. Saying like, if you're still living in the house where the event happened, that might be a hard thing.
What was that first thing you mentioned? The type of therapy that you...
EMDR, it is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And it's equivalent to 10 talk therapy sessions. And it just rewires the brain where you're not in that fight or flight all the time. And you may have to do 10 sessions, 8 sessions, and you may have to do 50, you may have to do 100. Just really depends on how much trauma and how much you have to process, and also how much you are getting re-triggered. Because at one point, like I had to put boundaries on podcasts because I overshared my trauma. I overshared my attacks so much. And then I would keep getting these flashbacks that I worked so hard in EMDR therapy to get rid of.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I can only imagine, you know, going by certain locations or whatever. Yeah. How about, have you taken any, you didn't take any self-defense classes before this. And I got to say, from my perspective, amazing. I mean, yeah.
Thank you. I just watched a lot of Walking Dead.
And I heard that, and all these people are taking all this stuff. Just watch Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And what message would you want to tell somebody if they're in a current dangerous situation like this, somebody that's trying to manipulate them?
Don't confront them right away. You always want to plan because they are probably 10 steps ahead of you already. So planning how to get out, confiding in a safe friend that you know is not going to tell them. And maybe they can also help you plan that leave. But there's also certain apps out there that you can get that your abusers can't see, or it comes up like as a different app. There is a domestic hotline number. They can also give you resources to also help plan that leave. If you do look up anything on the computer, make sure you always clear that history, and you also look up a few things afterwards to also put on that history so that it shows that you're actually doing stuff and you're not erasing your full history, because they're also going to be curious why you erased your full history.
Yeah.
And just really planning, and get smart. Don't get emotional.
Yeah. I always tell clients, do not show your cards, because they may have some breadcrumbs, some piece of information. I go, don't say anything. We'll get you the other stuff, but don't show your cards, because it can heighten the situation depending on what it is.
Yeah. And like, if someone is so good at reading people, they're going to get when the flip switches.
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to study that baseline just like you're trying to study theirs, and they're going to be like, oh, something's going on. Yeah. The impression I got is you guys are just nice people pleasers. You're always concerned about others, and people will use that, manipulate that. Yeah. And so this started out as the whole media thing started out on the Daily Pilot and then went to LA Times.
Yes.
Okay. And then you guys were on the podcast, and were you happy how that portrayed everything?
I think that, and I hope you empathize with this, but you do, because you hired a team of women.
Yes.
As a male, you can't tell a female story. And you just never know what it's like to go down the street and literally get catcalled, and so I think that it's important for there to be an understanding of, say, coercive control about what it's like the actual fear that you live in. Because some days, I wish I could have the confidence to walk down a street and not feel like something's going to happen. But it's sad because that has happened to me, but I feel like every other girl I know has that fear, and that hasn't happened to them.
Yeah, and it happens to so many people, and like you said, our team relates a lot to a lot of our clients, and yeah, you just, some people don't have that understanding.
Yeah.
And you could be a successful person like your mom. You could be extremely smart in certain arenas, but you don't see it coming sometimes.
Yeah.
And guys can be victims of all of it, but how about the TV show? Were you happy with that, how that was portrayed?
I was excited about that because I also worked in film and TV production. I did some background work. My ex was trying to be a DP, and that was someone that I was with for 8 years. So that was a really big part of my life. And so it was kind of like this excitement and this dissociation when it came out. So I was really excited, but then it comes out and then it's so much more real than you think it would be.
Yeah.
And so it kind of hit like a secondary trauma for me. I do think that it had a great cast. I think it had great actors. And I think that the storyline was great. But when you're doing things yourself and if you're in charge, you're always going to do things differently.
Did they ask your opinion?
Yes.
Yeah.
They did. Well, they did ask my opinion for my scene. And they said that they wanted to do it how exactly it went down. But then they let me know that a few things would be changed just for like filming. And I got that. Like the girl put up her backpack. I feel like that might have been probably something I should have done, but I put up my purse underneath my chest instead.
Yeah.
Both are great things. And so I had a contribute to that, and I literally got down on the ground. I showed them how I defended myself, and I talked to the stunt coordinator. However, all the rest of the film, I didn't have any contribution to it other than sharing my story and then them taking what they wanted to use and not wanted to use from that.
Did the actress that portrays you talk to you and try to get your mannerisms and all that stuff, or no? Nothing
No,
like that?
she's a busy girl.
Yeah.
And she was doing Ozark. She was literally coming from Ozark and then going to LA. So she really didn't have the time to even do that.
Yeah.
But I got to meet her on set, and she's just a lovely soul. She was so kind. And, you know, we still follow each other on social media. I got to know her sister because her sister has a little bit more time on her hands and isn't working like crazy golden hours with filming. And so I really got to know her sister, and her sister is a great person too.
That's cool. Now, how about, is there going to be any other media? I thought I heard something about a movie, or is it done? Is everything?
For the most part, everything is done. I might be working on something myself, but I can't say what it is quite yet.
Okay. And then how about, what are you working on now that you can say?
Okay, yeah. So I have a podcast course going on. I like to teach people about ethical true crime and what it's like to actually take these stories from the headlines and make media content about it, and how to be a little bit more ethical in your storytelling. But I also teach people the basis, like how to start the podcast, how to use the sounds, the mics to use, all the great equipment you might need, what it's like to do in person, what it's like to do virtual, and what a studio setup might look like. I try to give them all the tools to use, even if they don't want to start a true crime podcast. It's just helpful for them to have, like, figure out a way to make it better or just like a bit more ethical in life, because we are that way with animals. We're that way with like fashion at times. And so why can't we be that way with true crime when so many people are profiting off of these stories?
You're right. Well, I really appreciate you coming and talking to me, and it means a lot. Your story is amazing.
Thank you. Thank you for
very
having
much.
me.
Yeah.